Hello and welcome to 3D modeling video number 40. In this video I keep teaching you guys about normal maps. So one thing that's very important to keep in mind when you're making normal maps is you should modify your geometry so that when you bake it you get the best result possible. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Here I've got a plane and two objects. And I'll show you the difference between a good geometry and bad geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this cylinder over here. I'll go ahead and remove these two edges. I'll select the top and scale it inwards. Then I'll go back and add those two edges. For this object, for this gear looking object, I'll go ahead and duplicate it as well. There are a number of things you can do to modify this. You can, for example, use an FFD cylinder. But here's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and turn on by angle 45, select the top. I'll go ahead and apply a push modifier. The push modifier will take the selection and push it inwards. Of course, what it does is that it can also mess up the evenness of the surface. So okay, let me try that one again. Okay, I'll go ahead and apply push it inwards, put a poly on top, select the polygons, and now I have two options. I can click on make planar. What that will do is that will take the average of all your normals and make it planar according to that average. So if I click on make planar, it's going to make the top polygons flat. I'll go ahead and press Ctrl Z to undo, and I can also do the same by clicking on Z. That will make it planar on the Z axis and flatten it out. And I'll go ahead and collapse that. And I will go ahead and select both of these two gears, apply turbo smooth, 2 iterations, check smoothing groups, and I'll go ahead and apply turbo smooth to these two and apply turbo smooth to these two as well. And if you want to be more efficient in your viewport, make sure your viewport runs faster. What you can do is you can right click and give this 0 iterations. Click on where it says render iteration, this check mark, and then give it 1 or 2 here. This way you can keep turbo smooth off in the viewport but have it turned on when you're rendering it. And I can do the same for this. I can right click but give it 2 iterations. So what I'm doing now is I'm giving it 2 iterations of turbo smooth with smoothing groups on to give this nice result. If smoothing groups was off, then this would happen. But to keep those hard edges, I'll turn smoothing groups on, and then I'm giving it 1 iteration of regular turbo smooth with no smoothing group option, so we get this nice effect. And since I'm checking render iterations, that means that the viewport will be very smooth, very efficient, and the turbo smooth will only happen once it's being rendered. Okay, so now let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and move this up a little bit. I'll go ahead and clone this. Actually, first let me show what happens if I don't have a plane here. So I'll select this plane, I'll give it a projection modifier, I'll go ahead into the pick list, and the pick list shows all the objects in the scene, even the ones that are hidden. So I'm going to go over here, and where it says display hidden objects, I'll go ahead and turn this off. So here we go. I'll select all of them and click on add. I'm going to go into the sub object mode. I'm going to select cage, press Ctrl A, and I'm going to move it up in the front viewport, and I'm going to move it up until the cage covers all the objects. See, if the cage is just down here, it's not going to cover the top of these objects. So I need to make sure that the cage covers all of them, right about there. I'll go ahead and press 0, or I can go here, rendering, render to texture, and the shortcut is 0. Projection mapping is enabled. I've already previously set up the normal map here. I've already given it a name, and I'll go ahead and click on render. It's asking me if I want to overwrite it. I'll go ahead and click on overwrite files. I'll go ahead and press escape to exit. Okay, so if you don't have a plane, you'll get this red background and it can give you a strange looking normal map. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you can go ahead and duplicate the plane. I can delete projection from this one, and this will make sure that when I'm baking, I bake a plane on the bottom of these objects. So it's not just the objects being baked into thin air, there's also a plane being baked here. So now I'll go into projection, I'll click on pick, and I'll add this new plane. So now there's now 5 objects. Alright, and let me go ahead and try one again. And now it's not giving me that red, it's going to give me a nice result. And right away you can see that what I did on the right is giving me a nicer looking result than what I have on the left. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close this. I'll close this for now. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this plane. I'll go ahead and create a new material. I'll go ahead under bump, click on normal bump, click on the normal slot, bitmap, and I'll go ahead and select this, which is what we just baked. I'll click on apply. Make sure that the option is set to the second option, show hardware map in viewport, and I'll click on it. And now it's showing me the normal map, and I'll go ahead and set this to 100. Okay, so here is our normal map being applied to a regular flat plane. And you can see that the results on the right look a lot better than the results on the left. You can see that this gear really pops out on the right as opposed to the left. That's because we have a larger surface area being shown, being used. So how this works is that the program shoots rays towards the object, and wherever it hits, it generates a normal map there, a normal map texture. And so in this situation, the rays are being shot directly down, so it's only capturing the top of this area here. Because this is a flat plane, we're not going to get this depth here, so we might as well not even try. We might as well modify our cylinder to give us more visible surface area, and that will give us a much better result. So sometimes you should modify your geometry while keeping your normal map in mind. And you can see, because we moved this gear inwards, we got a much better result. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Another important thing to keep in mind, I'll go ahead and make some clones here. Let's say 4. And let's go ahead and try rendering one more time. So what we've got right now is we've got a plane with this normal map. So every time we render a new normal map, every time we bake a new normal map, it will replace this one. So we will automatically see the results right here. So I'll click on render, say overwrite, and as soon as it finishes baking, we will see the updated result on our plane. Okay, so that's an example of something a mistake you can make, is that whenever you add new geometry, you have to go in there and actually add it to your list. Otherwise, it won't consider it. So I'll go ahead and do that. Let's try one more time. Okay, so now that it's finished, we can see that we now have all of those gears inside here. And what I wanted to demonstrate here was that your texture space is limited. So when you add geometry and details, you should consider what the final product will be. If you have a limited amount of texture space, in this example I used 512 by 512. And that's the amount of space I have. So I want to build geometry that will go into that texture space well. In other words, if you add more and more detail, a lot of it will be lost in the texture resolution. Because when you're working on a game, there's a limit to what kind of textures, what kind of triangle limit, the amount of polygons and the texture resolution you can have. So you have to consider that when you're creating your geometry and when you're baking. You can see that the first two gears look good enough, but as it goes down, we're using up less and less texture space, so the normal map resolution isn't that high for the center, and the outer ones look okay, but the ones in the middle look very pixelated, so we might have to just go ahead and remove them. And that's a decision that you make as an artist, because if it doesn't look good enough, if there's not enough texture space, you might as well not have it in there, or come up with a different solution. And you can also maybe delete this third one as well. So when you're adding detail, don't add detail for the sake of detail. Think about your final product, think about your texture size, think about your triangle count when you're creating your geometry. Okay, so this is what we'll be working on next time, or next. So last time I gave you a very quick rushed example, and I made a few mistakes. This time I'm going to take things a little bit slower and show you guys in more detail how to create a nice, clean, accurate normal map. So this is kind of a canister. Maybe it holds oxygen, maybe it holds something else, and it connects to somebody's suit and provides them with oxygen or another type of gas, maybe fuel or something, and there's a little thing that you can turn to change the amount of intake and things like that. I'll go ahead and hide this tube for now. So let's focus on making, so this is a high poly object. There's no turbo smooth applied to this, but there will be once we're rendering it. So turbo smooth is off for now. So this is a canister being held on some kind of cloth-like object. So I went ahead and sculpted some cloth, decimated it, and then exported back into 3ds Max. And there's some cloth and there's like a few belts holding it in place. So this is a slightly more complex object than last time, because we've got some sculpted elements to it. So let's go ahead and begin creating our low poly mesh. So last time I showed you guys how we can use the freeform method using the graphite modeling tools. This time I'll show you the method of simply building geometry on top of it. I'll go ahead and click on low poly, make sure my low poly layer is the active one, and I'll go ahead and create a cylinder. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new material. I'm going to make the diffuse red. And the reason for that is so that I can easily distinguish between the low poly and the high poly. One of the reasons I keep my objects gray and give them a black object color is to be able to easily distinguish between different objects. So I'll go ahead and center it, and we can begin working. first thing, let's go ahead and change the radius. And don't forget, guys, if you like to follow along or see how this happens, follow along at home, look in the description and there will be a link to where you can download the project file. I'll give you guys this 3ds Max file. You should be able to open it with 3ds Max 2010 or newer. So you have 2011, 2012, 2013, and the newest one, 2014. All those versions should be able to open up this Max file. If you can't open it up or using a different program, I'll also give you guys the OBJ of the high poly. I'll give you an OBJ of the low poly with UVs and without UVs, so you can practice UVing as well. And of course, you can always practice the low poly creation. So the first important decision we have to make right away is how many sides do we give to our cylinder? One thing you should always be thinking about, guys, is how important is your object? Is this an object that the character sees from far away? Is this a first-person game, a third-person game, a strategy game, a real-time strategy game? What kind of game is it? How close will the camera be to your object? How important is your object to the gameplay? If this is an object like a weapon that the character will constantly be looking at, you want to go ahead and put more polys into that, more triangles. You want to make it look better, give it a higher texture resolution as well. If this is just a prop that will be laying around in the corner of the room, you might want to go ahead and decrease the amount of triangles and decrease the texture resolution because it's not as important. So I've decided this is an object that the character will be looking at very closely. This will have important gameplay repercussions. This is an important gameplay object, and the character will be able to look at this object very closely. So I'm going to need to put some time into it and make it look appropriate for its final use in game. So because of that, I can go ahead and perhaps increase the amount of sides right off the bat. If this was an unimportant prop, I could go ahead and decrease the sides. Maybe 12. So you can just zoom in on your camera and figure out how far away this object will be from the camera usually. Maybe this is just a random soda can trash prop object that's just laying around on the floor. In that case, you really don't need to give it that much geometry because it'll probably be this far away from the camera or even further. But this object will be viewed very closely, so I'll need to pick an appropriate amount of sides. I'll just go ahead and go with 32. Might be too much, might be too little, but for now I think it's good, and we can tweak this later on. For now I think 32 would be a good amount to start with. And I'll go ahead and delete the top and the bottom. I'll go ahead and select all the polygons and clear all the smoothing groups. So I'm going to go ahead and try to make it match the high poly geometry. Right about there. I'll go ahead and switch to my edge mode, and you can see that the bottom of this high poly is kind of rounded here, so we'll have to make it match. And usually the bottom of an object will not have that much geometry because it's the bottom and nobody will see that. Okay, and I'll go ahead and simply cap it for now. So this is what it looks like currently. It might be too much. And if you decide it's too much, here's what you can do to lower the amount of sides. What you do is you click on an edge, like right here, that's close to the middle. I'm not clicking on the middle edge. This is the middle edge. It's located at 0 centimeters on the x-axis. I'm going to pick the side that's close to it, And over here in your graphite modeling tools, there will be a little section here, and you want to click on this one right here called dot ring. This will do the same thing as ring, except it will skip one, select the next one, skip, and select. Then you want to click on loop. Then you want to go ahead and click on remove, and that will go ahead and remove those edges. So this is after and this is before. So this is a very nice trick for quickly removing your geometry. And there's something called level of detail. Various games have different levels of optimization, and one thing that lots of good games do, games that have lots of attention to them, that are high budget games, is that they use something called LODs, level of details. And what this basically means is that the further away you are from an object, the less detailed it will be. So if you're close to an object, you'll see this one. If you're further away, you'll see this object. It will just kind of pop into place.